They told me my son was just sensitive, that boys will be boys, that maybe, just maybe, I was too protective, a classic single mother trait they'd implied with their knowing, sympathetic smiles. They smiled politely, patronizingly, and told me to let the teachers handle it. That the system worked, that Ridgewood Elementary with its pristine lawns and glowing testimonials truly cared. But they didn't see him the way I did. They didn't see the dimming of the light in his eyes. Daniel had always been my quiet child. Not shy exactly, just thoughtful, introspective. The kind of boy who would rather spend an afternoon meticulously constructing intricate Lego castles complete with moats and dragons than playing tag on the sun-drenched playground. Who'd get lost for hours in the pages of books about dinosaurs roaming ancient lands or astronauts exploring distant galaxies? Who'd sit at the kitchen table, tongue poking out in concentration, drawing superheroes with impossibly dramatic capes fluttering in an imaginary wind, his crayons clutched in a determined fist? He had a rich inner world, a gentle soul. He wasn't a troublemaker. He wasn't disruptive. He certainly wasn't malicious. He was my boy, my gentle, sensitive, artistic boy, my Daniel. But lately, something had changed. A creeping shadow had fallen over his usually bright spirit. It started with the small things almost imperceptible at first, like tiny cracks in a flawless facade. A missed homework assignment blamed on a forgotten folder. A crumpled permission slip for the field trip to the Science Museum discovered too late at the bottom of his backpack, his face a mask of disappointment when I found it. Things I initially brushed off as the normal disorganization of a 10-year-old boy. Daniel, honey, I'd ask gently over our ritual of spaghetti dinners, a small attempt at normalcy in our often chaotic lives. How was school today? Anything interesting happen with Mr. Harris? His answers grew shorter, more evasive by the day. The vibrant stories he used to tell about his day, about what he learned or who he played with, dried up like a river in a drought. Fine, a shrug, eyes fixed on his plate. It was okay. Another shrug accompanied by a sigh, so faint I almost missed it. I don't know. The worst one delivered with a tone of utter resignation. I told myself it was just a phase. That maybe, after the difficult divorce from his father 2 years prior, he was still adjusting, still processing the upheaval in his young life. That maybe I was reading too much into it, my own stress from work and single parenting clouding my judgment. I was a human resources manager at a mid-sized tech firm. I dealt with people's problems all day. Perhaps I was bringing that hyper-awareness home. But then I noticed the sleeves. It was the middle of May in California, warm almost uncomfortably, so the kind of weather that beckoned for t-shirts and shorts. And yet, Daniel started wearing long-sleeved shirts every single day. Thick hoodies even pulled low over his brow. "Sweetheart, aren't you hot in that?" I'd ask, trying to sound casual breezy as I packed his lunch. "It's nearly 80 degrees out today." "I'm fine, Mom," he'd mumble, his gaze darting away, never meeting my eyes. I get cold in Mr. Harris's classroom. The AC is always blasting." An excuse, plausible perhaps. But the unease in my gut grew a cold knot, tightening with each passing day. I should have pushed. I should have sat him down, looked him in the eye, and demanded the truth. But I didn't. I was tired, overwhelmed, and a small, cowardly part of me didn't want to know, didn't want to face another battle. Until laundry day, a mundane chore that ripped the veil from my willful ignorance. I was folding clothes late on a Sunday night, the drone of a late-night talk show humming in the background, a pile of Daniel's shirts beside me. I picked up his favorite, the one with the faded Star Wars logo, the Millennium Falcon soaring across a field of stars. It was turned inside out in the hamper, and there, on the soft cotton of the inner sleeve, was a faint, purplish-yellow smudge, like an old bruise. I froze. My heart started pounding a frantic drum against my ribs. My breath hitched. I picked up the shirt, my fingers trembling, and turned it right side out. Then carefully I rolled up the sleeve. And there, on the tender skin of his inner forearm, were more marks, faint, old but unmistakable. A cluster of small circular bruises, the kind that fingers make when they grip too tightly. I stood there, gripping the shirt in my hands, the fabric suddenly feeling like sandpaper against my skin. My vision blurred. The room seemed to tilt. "Daniel," I called softly. my voice barely a whisper, struggling to keep it steady, to keep the rising panic from coloring my tone. He appeared in the doorway of his small bedroom, his frame silhouetted by the dim hallway light. He looked so little, so fragile, his pajamas hanging loosely on him. He was clutching his worn-out stuffed giraffe, Gerald, a relic from his toddler years he still sometimes slept with. "Come here, baby." My voice was gentle, but there was an undercurrent he must have sensed. He shuffled over his eyes, downcast, already anticipating trouble, though he couldn't know why. He stopped a few feet away, Gerald clutched to his chest like a shield. I held up the sleeve, the damning evidence displayed in the harsh light of the laundry room. "Can you tell me what happened here, honey? How did you get these bruises?" For a long, agonizing moment, he didn't say anything. He just stood there, his shoulders hunched, his small fingers twisting the worn fur of Gerald's ears. The silence stretched thick with unspoken fear. Then, barely above a whisper, a voice so small I had to strain to hear it. He said, "It was Mr. Harris." The words hit me like a physical blow, a punch to the gut that knocked the air from my lungs. Mr. Harris, his fifth-grade teacher, the man entrusted with his care, his education, the man whose classroom was supposed to be a safe haven. I knelt down in front of him, the tiled floor cold against my knees. I gently cupped his face in my hands, forcing him to look at me. His eyes were wide, swimming with unshed tears. "Baby, what do you mean? What did Mr. Harris do to you?" Daniel's lower lip trembled. He bit down on it, a valiant effort to hold back the sobs. He grabbed my arm, really hard. When I didn't finish my math worksheet fast enough, he said I was being lazy, and he told me I was stupid, that I'd never be good at anything, that I was a disappointment. Each word was a fresh stab to my heart. I felt my vision blur with my own tears. My hands shook. How many times, Daniel, I asked, my voice hoarse, barely a whisper. How many times has he hurt you or said things like that? He hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. Then, so quietly I almost didn't catch it, he said, "A lot." "Mom, it happens. A lot." I wrapped him in my arms, pulling him close, holding him so tight I thought I might break us both. He buried his face in my shoulder and finally let the sobs come, great shuddering gasps that shook his small body. I rocked him back and forth, murmuring reassurances. I didn't feel my own tears silently soaking his hair. That night, long after Daniel had cried himself to sleep in my bed, his small hand clutching mine, I sat in the dark of the living room, the offending shirt still clutched in my hands like a sacred, terrible relic. I stared at the flickering shadows on the ceiling, my mind a maelstrom of rage, guilt, and a terrifying cold resolve. I had trusted them, the teachers, the school, the system. I had believed in their smiles, their reassurances, their glossy brochures promising a nurturing environment. But they hadn't protected him. They had allowed this to happen. They had hurt him. And I wasn't going to let it happen again. This wasn't just about bruises. This was about the slow, insidious erosion of my son's spirit. And I, Julia Thompson, was going to war. The next morning I sent Daniel to school as if it were any other day. The charade was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. I packed his lunch carefully, avoiding his bruised arm. I kissed his forehead, my lips lingering a moment longer than usual. I whispered, "I love you, baby. Have a good day," like I did every morning. But inside, I was a roaring inferno of controlled fury. My mind was already mapping out a battlefield. As soon as the door closed behind him, the click of the latch echoing in the sudden silence, I sat at the kitchen table, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, and pulled out my laptop. I opened a blank document. At the top, in bold, stark letters, I typed, "The truth about Mr. Harris and Ridgewood Elementary." Then I started writing. Every detail Daniel had tearfully recounted the night before. Every bruise I'd documented with my phone camera, the timestamp a damning indictment. every dismissive note I'd received from the school over the past few months blaming Daniel for being difficult, for acting out in class, for not applying himself. I pulled up the school's emails from my inbox. I printed every single one. The condescending tones, the subtle gaslighting, the complete lack of genuine concern. I dug out Daniel's report cards, the one where Mr. Harris had scrawled in red ink, "Daniel lacks focus and discipline. He is easily distracted and needs to learn to respect authority." I remembered how proud Daniel had been of his science project earlier in the year, a meticulously constructed volcano he built with baking soda and vinegar, its eruption a source of immense joy for him. And I remembered the casual cruelty in his voice when he told me Mr. Harris had dismissed it as messy and unoriginal in front of the whole class, making the other children laugh. I remembered the day Daniel came home with his art project, a vibrant, imaginative drawing of a fantasy creature, crumpled into a tight ball in his backpack. He'd whispered that Mr. Harris had looked at it with disdain and told him, "This isn't art, Daniel. This is a waste of time and materials. You clearly have no talent in this area." My artistic, sensitive boy, crushed by the careless words of a man who held so much power over him. Every memory, every slight, every dismissive comment sharpened into a blade, honing my resolve. This wasn't just about physical abuse. It was about a systematic campaign of emotional and psychological torment. I picked up my phone and called Marcus Green, my neighbor, my friend, the retired lawyer who had been my rock during the legal battles from my previous life-altering nightmare. "Julia," he said, his voice calm, steady, blessedly unsurprised. "I've been waiting for this call. I saw Daniel yesterday. He didn't look right." Tears welled in my eyes at his quiet perceptiveness. I told him everything. The bruises, the long sleeves, the fear in my son's eyes, the soul-crushing words Mr. Harris had used, the school's utter failure to protect him. "Start documenting everything meticulously, Julia," he said, his voice taking on a professional edge. "Every conversation, every email, every meeting. Dates, times, witnesses, if any. Scan those bruises with a date stamp if you can. We need a fortress of evidence." "I already have," I whispered, my voice thick with unshed tears. "I started last night. It's worse than I thought." "Good," he said, a note of grim satisfaction in his voice. "Because we're going to need it all. This won't be easy. Schools are adept at protecting their own." That afternoon, I left work early, claiming a sudden migraine. I parked across the street from Ridgewood Elementary, my hands trembling on the steering wheel as I watched the school doors swing open and children spill out like a joyous, chaotic flood. Daniel walked slowly, his backpack slung low over one shoulder, his head down, a small, solitary figure in the swirling mass of his peers. And then, a few steps behind him, emerging from the school's imposing double doors, there he was, Mr. Harris, tall, smug, impeccably dressed in a crisp shirt and a tie that looked like a noose he thought he'd never have to tighten around his own neck. He was laughing with another teacher, a sharp barking sound of condescension, his eyes scanning the playground with an air of bored superiority, like nothing in the world could touch him, certainly not the concerns of a mere parent. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The urge to storm out of the car to confront him right there, to scream the truth in his arrogant face, was almost overwhelming. But I didn't. I took a deep, shuddering breath. Not yet. Revenge. Marcus had once told me is a dish best served cold, with irrefutable evidence and a brilliant legal strategy. I had a plan, a meticulous, multi-layered plan. That night, after Daniel was asleep, his breathing finally even and peaceful, I sat at my laptop, headphones plugged in, and scoured the Ridgewood Elementary School District's website. I read every policy, every student handbook, every code of conduct, every beautifully worded anti-bullying statement they posted like a badge of honor. I downloaded their official complaint procedures. I found the loopholes, the contradictions, the vague language designed to protect the institution, not the child. I noted the things they said they'd enforce, but clearly never did. Then, I went on Amazon and ordered a small, high-quality digital voice recorder, the kind that could pick up clear audio even from inside a backpack. It would arrive in 2 days. The morning the recorder arrived, I carefully, almost reverently, tucked it into the hidden front pocket of Daniel's backpack right next to his lunchbox. "Just keep it with you, baby," I told him, brushing his dark hair back from his forehead, trying to keep my expression neutral. "You don't have to do anything. Just let it be there. It's for a school project Mommy is helping with. A lie, but a necessary one." He was already carrying too much. His eyes widened slightly. "Am I in trouble, Mom?" I kissed his forehead, my heart aching at his immediate assumption of blame. "No, sweetheart. Never. You're helping Mommy tell the truth. You're being very brave." That day, I sat at my desk at work, a knot of anxiety twisting in my stomach, barely able to concentrate on the spreadsheets and reports in front of me. My phone lay on the desk beside me, like a lifeline, a potential harbinger of disaster or discovery. Every time it buzzed with an email or a message, my stomach flipped. I replayed worst-case scenarios in my head. What if the recorder was found? What if Daniel accidentally revealed it? When Daniel got home that afternoon, his face was pale, his usual after-school energy absent. I practically pounced on his backpack, trying to appear casual as I unzipped it and retrieved the small, innocuous-looking device. My hands were shaking. I waited until Daniel was absorbed in a cartoon, then retreated to my bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of my bed. With trembling fingers, I plugged the recorder into my laptop and pressed play. What I heard made my blood run cold. Mr. Harris's voice, sharp cold, laced with a cruel sarcasm, filled the tiny speakers of my headphones so clear, it was as if he were in the room with me. "You're pathetic, Daniel. Utterly pathetic. Can't even manage simple multiplication. What hope is there for you? Maybe if your mother wasn't so busy feeling sorry for herself all the time, you wouldn't be such a mess. Did she even bother to look at your homework last night?" I heard the distinct scrape of a chair, a heavy thud as if a book had been slammed down on a desk. Then, Daniel's small, hesitant voice, barely audible. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harris. I tried." Harris sneering. "Sorry doesn't cut it, does it, Daniel? Not in the real world." "Maybe next time I'll just have to call your mother and tell her she should teach you some respect if she's not too busy failing at life herself. Single mothers, you know, always so overwhelmed." I sat frozen, my heart slamming against my ribs like a trapped animal. The personal, vicious nature of his attacks, not just on Daniel, but on me. It was monstrous. Then I heard it, the sound that would haunt my nightmares for weeks. A sharp crack, not loud, but distinct, like a ruler hitting a desk or flesh, followed immediately by a yelp, a small, startled cry of pain. Daniel's yelp. I ripped the headphones off my breath, coming in ragged, shallow gasps. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely control them. Tears burned down my cheeks, hot and blinding tears of rage, of helplessness, of a mother's unbearable pain. He had hit my son, or done something to cause him to cry out in pain. The audio was undeniable. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, the small recorder clutched in my lap like a weapon, and I made a decision. A cold, hard, irrevocable decision. I wasn't going to the principal, Karen Miller. She had already proven herself to be part of the problem, a gatekeeper of the school's pristine image, quick to dismiss parental concerns. I wasn't going to the school board, not yet. They would try to bury it, to manage it, to conduct a slow internal investigation that would go nowhere. I was going public. I was going to ignite a firestorm. I opened a new document on my laptop and started drafting an email. My fingers flew across the keyboard, fueled by adrenaline and a righteous fury. Subject urgent. Whistleblower report. Documented child abuse and negligence at Ridgewood Elementary School. I attached the audio recordings from Daniel's backpack. I had 3 days' worth by then, each more damning than the last. I attached the time-stamped photos of Daniel's bruises. I attached copies of the dismissive emails from the school administration. I attached scanned statements from the few other parents I'd managed to quietly contact, parents whose children had also suffered under Mr. Harris, their stories eerily similar to Daniel's. I built a fortress of evidence just as Marcus had advised. And then I compiled a list of recipients: the superintendent of the school district, every single member of the school board, the Child Protective Services hotline, and crucially, the investigative reporters at 3 major local news outlets and 2 influential parenting blogs. With a steady hand, I clicked send. The email, a digital bomb, was launched. Then I called Marcus. "It's time," I said, my voice surprisingly calm, devoid of the tremor I felt in my soul. "I've sent it." He didn't ask what I meant. He knew. He just said, "I'm ready, Julia. Let the storm begin." The email spread like wildfire, just as I had hoped, just as I had feared. By the next morning, my phone was vibrating nonstop and incessant buzzing against my kitchen counter. My email inbox was exploding. Subject lines flooded in a deluge of official concern and thinly veiled panic. "Urgent. We have received your report concerning Ridgewood Elementary. Please contact my office immediately for a meeting." From the superintendent's chief of staff, "Your serious concerns have been escalated to the highest level. An internal review is being initiated." From the president of the school board, "We are mandated reporters. We are opening an immediate investigation into the matter of alleged child abuse." From Child Protective Services, the local news stations were the quickest to react. A polite but persistent reporter named Lily Carter from Channel 7 News called first. She sounded young, earnest, genuinely shocked by the details in my email. She asked if I'd be willing to share my story on camera to give a voice to the evidence. I hesitated for only a moment. This was the point of no return. "Yes," I said, my voice firm. "Yes, I will." They sent a camera crew to my small apartment that very evening. Daniel sat on the worn floral couch, his small hands folded neatly in his lap, his eyes wide and slightly scared as the technicians set up lights and cameras, transforming our familiar living room into a makeshift television studio. I knelt in front of him, cupping his face, trying to shield him from the intensity of it all. "You don't have to say anything if you don't want to, sweetheart," I whispered. "I'll do all the talking. This is my fight." But Daniel, my quiet, sensitive boy, surprised me. He shook his head, a new steely resolve in his young eyes. "I want to, Mom," he whispered back, his voice surprisingly firm. "He needs to know he can't do this to kids." And when the cameras rolled, when Lily Carter asked him gently about his experiences, he sat up straighter, his voice clear and unwavering, though his small hands trembled slightly in mine. "My teacher, Mr. Harris, he hurt me," Daniel said, looking directly into the camera. "He said I was stupid and that I would never be good at anything." He grabbed my arm really hard and it left bruises. I was scared to go to school. My heart swelled with a fierce, aching pride. He was finding his voice, his strength, even in the face of such trauma. The news segment aired that night on the 10 o'clock news. Local mother accuses Ridgewood Elementary teacher of abuse, exclusive interview and disturbing audio evidence. Within hours, the video clip of the news report went viral online. Parents from our district and then from neighboring districts started sharing their own stories in the comments section of the news station's website and on social media. Stories of bullying, ignored, of concerns dismissed, of children failed by the very system designed to protect them. The hashtags began trending: #Justice for Daniel Ridgewood, #Hold Ridgewood, accountable, #Mothers, back for our kids, #Fire Mr. Harris. By the end of the week, the pressure on the school board was immense, a relentless public outcry they could no longer ignore or manage with carefully worded press releases. They called an emergency public meeting. I sat in the front row of the packed school auditorium, Marcus Green by my side, his presence a quiet reassurance. Daniel's small hand was tucked safely in mine. The air buzzed with whispers, with gasps of disbelief from parents who were hearing the full extent of the allegations for the first time, and with a palpable, barely contained outrage. The superintendent, a man named Dr. Alastair Finch, looking flustered and pale, cleared his throat at the podium. "We are here today," he began, his voice amplified by the microphone, yet sounding weak and uncertain, to address serious allegations that have been made against a teacher at Ridgewood Elementary. Mr. Thomas Harris allegations that have understandably raised serious concerns within our community and across the district. Mr. Harris sat at a table to the side of the stage, flanked by a union representative and a lawyer. His usual smugness was gone, replaced by a pasty, sweaty pallor. His tie was loosened, and he studiously avoided my gaze, staring intently at a notepad in front of him. But I didn't look away from him. I met his averted gaze with a steady, unwavering stare. When they asked if I, Julia Thompson, had anything further to say beyond the evidence already submitted, I stood. My knees shook beneath me, but I locked them. My voice when I spoke was steady, amplified by the microphone they offered. I told them about the bruises, not just the ones on his arm, but the invisible ones on his spirit. I told them about the recordings, about the soul-crushing words he'd endured day after day. I told them about the fear in my son's eyes when he begged me not to make him go back to that classroom. Then, with a nod from Marcus, I signaled the AV technician. I played a short, damning compilation of the audio aloud for the entire room to hear. Mr. Harris's voice, cold and cruel, filled the auditorium. "You're pathetic, Daniel. You'll never be good enough, just like your mother probably. Why are you even trying, Thompson? You're a lost cause." The sharp crack followed by Daniel's yelp of pain echoed through the stunned silence. Gasps rippled through the room. Some parents covered their mouths in horror. Others openly wept. I saw raw fury on the faces of fathers and anguished empathy on the faces of mothers. I looked at the faces on the stage, the school board members, the superintendent, the principal, Karen Miller, who looked like she wanted the earth to swallow her whole, seeing their shock, their dawning shame, their utter horror at the public relations nightmare unfolding before their very eyes. And then, Principal Miller, ever the protector of the school's image, tried to speak, her voice trembling. "We deeply regret that Mrs. Thompson felt her concerns were not adequately," she began, but I cut her off, my voice ringing with righteous anger. "No, don't you dare say you regret it now. You ignored my calls for weeks. You dismissed my concerns as an overprotective mother. You protected him. You enabled him. Your regret is about being caught, not about what happened to my son." Her mouth snapped shut, her face flushing a mottled red. I could see the truth sinking in on the faces around her, on the faces of the community. I wasn't just a disgruntled mother with a grudge. I was a mother with irrefutable proof. The school board went into a closed executive session that night. The outcome was swift. Mr. Thomas Harris was terminated from his position at Ridgewood Elementary, effective immediately, his teaching license suspended pending further investigation by the state. Principal Karen Miller, facing a vote of no confidence and overwhelming public pressure, submitted her resignation 2 days later, her carefully curated career forever stained by the headlines. The district released a lengthy formal public apology to Daniel and myself and to the community. They pledged new training, new oversight, new policies. But it wasn't enough to undo the damage. Marcus, true to his word, helped me file a civil lawsuit, one against the school district for gross negligence and failure to protect, and one against Mr. Harris personally for assault battery and intentional infliction of emotional distress. And after a long and arduous legal process, we won. Daniel and I stood in a civil courtroom months later holding hands as the judge read the verdict, his voice ringing with solemn authority through the quiet chamber. In favor of the plaintiff, Julia Thompson, on behalf of her minor son, Daniel Thompson. A significant monetary settlement, yes. A court-ordered apology from Mr. Harris delivered through his lawyer. But more than that, it was vindication. It was justice. It was a public acknowledgement that what had happened was wrong and that those responsible were held accountable. It wasn't truly over, not in the way stories and books end. The scars remained. Daniel still flinched sometimes when a male voice was raised too loudly, even my own if I was stressed. He still preferred long sleeves, even when it was warm, as if some small, vulnerable part of him was still hiding, still protecting itself from an unseen threat. We started therapy both individually and together, slowly working through the trauma, unraveling the knots of fear and self-doubt that Mr. Harris had so cruelly tied. But we were healing. Slowly, painstakingly, we were rebuilding. The night after the final court ruling, we sat on our old couch, the television humming softly with a nature documentary, a comforting, neutral sound. I asked him how he felt, truly felt. He was quiet for a long moment, tracing the patterns on the worn armrest. "Lighter, Mom," he said finally, his voice soft. Like a really heavy backpack I didn't know I was carrying is finally gone. And then, after another pause, he looked at me. his young face serious, his eyes holding a wisdom far beyond his years. Do you think it'll happen to other kids now? At other schools, I looked at him, my heart breaking and swelling with love all at once. My brave, empathetic boy already thinking of others. Not if I can help it, sweetheart, I said, and the conviction in my voice surprised even me. Not if we can help it. And I meant it. I had found a new purpose in the ashes of our ordeal. I started a local support group, Mothers and Advocates for Justice and Education, MAGI. A safe space where parents could share their stories without judgment, find support, learn their rights, and collectively fight back when the system failed their children when no one else would listen. We held meetings in public library conference rooms and community centers in the back rooms of bustling coffee shops. We wrote letters to legislators. We showed up en masse at school board meetings, a visible vocal force for change. We learned how to navigate the bureaucratic maze, how to file formal complaints, how to speak to the media. And we made noise, so much noise that they couldn't ignore us anymore. Because if I learned one profound life-altering thing through all of this, it's that silence is the abuser's greatest weapon. Silence allows the darkness to fester and grow. And mothers. When their children are threatened, mothers are warriors. They are the first line of defense, the last bastion of hope. Daniel's smile, the genuine, unburdened smile I had missed so desperately, came back slowly. Tentatively at first, like the sun emerging after a long, violent storm. He started drawing again, his superheroes more vibrant, their capes more defiant than ever. One Saturday afternoon, months later, I found him sitting at the kitchen table, completely absorbed in a new drawing. He held up the paper for me to see. It was a striking image of a woman, her eyes fierce, her stance unwavering, a protective shield in one hand and a glowing sword in the other. Behind her, a small boy looked up at her with adoration. "This is you, Mom," he said, his voice clear and proud. "You're my hero. You saved me." And in that moment, looking at his shining face at the masterpiece he had created, I knew with every fiber of my being that it had all been worth it. Every tear, every sleepless night, every gut-wrenching confrontation, every moment of fear and doubt. Because I didn't just protect my son from one monster. I taught him that his voice mattered. I taught him that he was worthy of being fought for. I taught him how to stand up for himself and for others. And no one will ever take that away from us. The storm had passed, and in its wake we had found not just survival, but a strength we never knew we possessed.